By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
First and foremost, giving all honor and glory to the God of our forefathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for his mastery, his love, and his ability to the ability for him to come and wake us all up this morning and get us here safely. I thank him this day for even allowing us to be here, to be able to come together, to communicate, to be able to have dialogue. What I do want to address, I want to first talk about our organization, D.C.B. D.C.B, the meaning of D.C.B is righteous nation, and the purpose of D.C.B was created to fill the gaps of community service that's within our nation. Oftentimes, we know how to sing, we know how to praise, we know how to speak, we know how to do all of those elements, but we don't know how to service our community. And, you know, part of the reason, if you read in the prophecies of Ezekiel and Isaiah, that we went into slavery was because we were treating each other badly. We had no care or concern for one another. We were even making slaves out of fellow Israelites. These things were things that we did that caused us to go into captivity, and it was well deserved. So part of reversing some of that, the epidemic and the crisis that we deal with today, is to do those things we were supposed to do initially. Care for your brother, care for your people, have concern about them, because our condition is a common condition. You know, don't get knowledge yourself and then get a lofty head. You have to be able to take the knowledge and go back down and reach out to get other people out of that pit that you were once in. And even if you were born in this way of life, we are still in the pit because we're still living in the circumstance. We're still living in America. Our people are still dying. So we need to do whatever we can to make sure that, especially those who have the knowledge of self, that we can change the circumstances and the conditions of our people in this day and time. Agreed? Hallelujah. So first and foremost, I want us to focus on some concepts. Oh man, you mean it ain't working for me, man? That's messed up. This is prejudice, man. This is prejudice, man. Am I pressing the right thing? That's what it is. Okay, let me go back. Can somebody define objective for me?
Without bias.
Without bias. Without bias. The object, right? That's also another interpretation for objective. But for this, I'm looking for more of that version. The objective is the aim. You are totally right. Impartial. Now, can somebody define truth? Honesty. Facts. Objective, truth. Unbiased, facts. Oftentimes, especially in religious settings, we're given our version of the facts, our version of the truth. The truth should always be objective. What Chief Benjamin, Rabbi Benjamin gave you was fact-based evidence concerning the conditions of our people. It's not coming from a personal point of view where I'm just telling you what I feel, but I am telling you what actually happened. Now, I know sometimes you're watching TV and you see people having debates and arguments, but the facts are the facts. You have this thing now that Trump is doing called what? Alternative facts. Alternative facts is my version of the truth. Right. I am giving you my version of what I think the truth is. This is not the job of us here today at the Valley of the Dry Bones or any lecture that we do, our job is to give you the objective truth. That means it's going to be plain, it's going to be given with facts, and then it's these things that you can take and look up on your own. See, part of this is not just to go, yeah, man, that was a good lecture. I like the brother. I like how they taught. Take the information and run with it. Take the information and do your own research on it. I did the Black History Month lecture. Some of you that were there, I've been here when I did it, and I talked about the Hidden Figures movie. And you know, me and my girlfriend went to see the movie, and I stood back and I looked and I said, after I finished, I said, babe, you know, how come I didn't know this? How come I didn't know that my sisters were responsible for putting the first man on the moon, or on space? How come my daughters get imageries of Nicki Minaj and hoochies and all types of stuff, but a positive image like that they could have had for years, they don't have? What's the problem? So it's bad when we don't pursue our greatness, but it's also bad when they hide the greatness from us. So we have to clearly understand that we cannot rely on any system of government that's coming from our oppressors to educate us, even about us. That's stuff that we need to know. And I want you to get a concept. Interference. I took the word white out, but it's really supposed to be white interference. And I want to tell you about white interference. White supremacy has taught that by nature the black man is inferior. By nature, he can't accomplish these things. He needs a hand, he needs a help, he needs a big brother. His brain is not that big. If it wasn't for us, he'd still be a savage in Africa, running around naked, eating on one another, and you know, all types of craziness, and practicing witchcraft and all types of stuff, right? Interesting, but black people never went to Europe en masse to get anything from them. Black people never had a need to go outside of their zone, their space, for anything. Whites went to Africa, not just to get people, but to get other resources, to get everything from outside to build what they need. So the interference is, what would I be if you didn't bother me? What would my potential be if you didn't make me a slave? If you didn't deprive me of my right to read and write, or to be educated? If you didn't suppress my culture, what would I be? Because what they gave us, or what they did, was interfere with our progress. You know, molestation. Molestation is a very bad problem in this country. But what molestation does, oftentimes when you see people who are victims of molestation, when they get older, sometimes they become promiscuous, they become homosexual, they become violent because their process was interfered with. The natural growth process of individuals that, you know, because sex is part of identity, it's part of your growth, it's part of your understanding, but that got interfered with. And the hidden story of our culture is that, you know, we read about being whipped, we read about being oppressed, we read about rights being taken away from us. But like Dr. DeGrasse says, those hidden perversions that these people came with when they grabbed us from our home in West Africa, we don't hear about that too much. You know, there was a story about a woman in Louisiana who would eat black people. And they found them in one of these rooms when they were doing all of these maniacal objects and stuff, and they would eat black people. Those of you who saw Birth of a Nation, there was a scene during the rebellion scene that a white man was in the bed with a little girl. And that was a very common practice amongst them. And not only that, they mess with our little boys too. Because some people, their definition of what homosexuality is or adultery is has nothing to do with what they do to black people. It's only a rule or a law concerning what white people do to one another. So if a white person were to do that to a little boy, it's a meaningless crime. So we want to talk about that interference. And later, I want your ideas on how we can eliminate the interference. Because we can't, we can't be what we need to be with other people messing in our progress, inhibiting us from doing what we need to do as a people to grow. Right. So this concept that I'm going to give you is for social engineering. This is what Benjamin talked about concerning Jim Crow, black codes. All of this was forms of social engineering. Simple definition: the practice of making laws or using other methods to influence public opinion and solve social problems or improve social conditions, right? That's the simple definition, but that definition really doesn't apply to us en masse. The full definition does. The full definition is management of human beings in accordance to their place and function in society. Applied social science. That means we want to keep those people, and black people, we are not second-class citizens. Right. We are second-caste citizens. We live in a caste system. Right? A caste system is a little bit different because in the caste system, you're born into a caste system and you cannot escape the caste system. We are given a caste system, like the Dravidians in India, where you're born in that underclass. You're born being the prostitutes, the uneducated. You're born being the people who they believe that, God gave you the worst of circumstances. Right. And then your kids are born in that same caste system. This is the way we exist. So social engineering is everything that we're seeing concerning the conditions of black people today. It's how we are being maneuvered. So the myth of our lack of education, our lack of ability to uplift, the fact that there are systems that are in place to help us think better, be stronger, whatever the case may be, because they believe that we are intellectually inferior. Those are all programs based on social engineering. Some of it is called, another word for it is called eugenics. Right. Eugenics was something, it's a white supremacy science, and when I say the word science, it's made up. But people try to make science to make things factual, so they use science behind it. But it's the whole idea that there are people who are better groomed to be in this world than others, right? There's people that are allotted there physically, intellectually better, and those are the people that should inherit the earth as opposed to those who may have defects. And in our case, a lot of people believe that being black is an actual defect. So how do we change that? Now, the mediums on how those things work are, number one, religion. I'm not here to knock your belief system. If you believe in Christianity, if you believe in Islam, if you believe in anything. But there is a problem if you are a Christian and you believe in a white Jesus. Yes. That is a sickness. That's not just something that's ordinary. Right? Because the concept of a human being God, some of us reject. But the concept of your enemy, in your adversary, being God or even a son of God is a sickness. Because you can never have freedom with the belief that your oppressor looks like that. Right? So most of the concepts that we see, I don't have the picture, but you see the Christian picture with the guy with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. Let me tell you how off that picture is. Do you know the percentage of people in the world with blue eyes? 10% of the people in the world have blue eyes. It's not a common thing that happens with human beings. Blue eyes is a definite deficiency. This is part of their science. That means that there's certain things that happen that didn't trigger enough light to create that brown stimuli in the eye, whatever the case may be. So therefore you have blue eyes. And with a blue eye, you don't see that good. What they don't tell you, they call, oh, it's beautiful. It's not good because you don't see that well. Your color palette is very much off because you have blue eyes. It's a deficiency. Right, it's a deficiency and you are sensitive. Right? And then you have the blonde hair. which is extremely rare amongst people. Only a certain group of people from a certain place really have blonde hair, right? Except for the Aboriginals, which have some type of thing where they have black skin and blonde hair coming out, but that's another story. Now we have the miseducation. Malcolm said that only a foolish people let the enemy teach their children, right? And why do I call it miseducation? Because your children live in a white supremacy system, and the main way they get their indoctrination in white supremacy is through school. A lot of us believe that it's TV, but you have to remember they spend more time in school than they actually spend with you. They spend more time in school than they spend in the religious institution. They spend more time in school than watching TV. Oftentimes, you may not notice that TV reinforces a lot of the garbage that they are learning inside school. Now, I'm not saying that math is bad. I'm not saying that science is bad. But when it comes to history, history has a great problem, and white people are not historians. I'm not telling you that they're not good historians. They are not historians. You can't be a white supremacist and a historian at the same time. Because history deals in fact, right? But white supremacy deals in making sure that that fact is skewed to support the idea that white people are superior. So therefore, you have books that will say that Egyptians were Caucasoids, when clearly they called themselves black people, they named themselves black land, everything about them means that they are black. They identify themselves as black. When you do your history and research, never look at an archaeologist's opinion of what the people are. Look at what the people call themselves. My brother Don Lex is here, right? So he does a lot of research on the Sumerian culture. If you look at Sumerian pictures, right? Not the ones that are written, there's some that are in limestone, because those are all white because everything in the picture is white. But you look at how they identify themselves as black people. They have the ability to draw things white, and they have the ability to draw things brown. They chose to draw themselves brown. They actually called themselves, or the land was called land or people of the black heads, right? And then you listen to people say, oh, you're talking about the hair. Why would they talk about hair when they have a word for hair? They call themselves people of the land of the black-headed people, because that's how they identify themselves. So what we find now is just a new culture that is trying to diminish our ability to be somebody, right? But we were somebody before we got here, and we will always be somebody. Entertainment, news media, social services, politics and government, economics, and us. That's not United States of America, that's us, that's black people, right? Part of the problem is that every brother ain't a brother, man. Every brother ain't a brother. Every sister ain't a sister. You have to clearly understand that there are people that they are working on behalf of your adversaries. This is common in warfare, right? And in warfare, you got people that are called traitors. You want to call them Benedict Arnolds, whatever the case may be, but they're working on behalf of the government to oppress us. You know, you want to have a good agent provocateur. The agent provocateur is somebody that looks like you, act like you, that can infiltrate what you're doing. There's probably an agent right here, right now. I don't know, right? But it's what it is, right? But clearly, those things that we can't control, we can't do nothing about, we leave in the Most High's hands. But those things that we can't control, we have to do more things about that. Right. We have to stop being our own worst enemy. We have to stop teaching and educating our daughters and our sons on ignorance and that things are okay. Oh, girl, it's okay if you do that. No, it's not okay. Oh, you can do this if you want to, son. Do this. It's not okay. All of these things are not okay. Like that process that Benjamin had laid out is very important, because we need a process. Not just of development, of redevelopment, because so much was taken away from us that we need to begin to reestablish. So I want to talk about white privilege and where it comes from. I know we went through Jim Crow and we talked about the black code, but I want to step back into how this whole concept of whiteness actually started, because it is a made-up concept. It is not true. Everything that you learned in schools about skulls and heads and how people are superior because they're taller and smarter was all a false narrative, right? This is the origin of white privilege. Only one fear was greater than the fear of black rebellion in the new American colonies. That was the fear that disconnected whites, that means the average white guy, would join black slaves to overthrow the existing order, because the rich had everybody under subjection. So if they saw that, wow, you know, if the blacks and the whites got together to take us over, that'll be easy because we're a small percent of that population. And if they really understood what we were doing to them and the manipulation that we were practicing against people, they will overthrow us. And it's sad, but white people are being subjected today. They just can't see it. In the early years of slavery, especially before racism as a way of thinking was firmly ingrained, in the early years of slavery, especially before racism as a way of thinking was firmly ingrained, while white indentured servants were often treated as badly as black slaves, there was the possibility of cooperation. That means that we can't let these people ever join hands. We can't let poor whites and poor blacks, because remember, the Irish weren't considered up to the standard of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Right. Neither were Jews, neither were Italians, neither were the Polish, neither were those people. But you had to invent a watchdog society, somebody that could keep others in check. So you grant them a little bit of privilege. Not a lot. They're not like you. They're not on that level. They're not trillionaires and millionaires and billionaires. But you grant them a little so that they can feel important and always keep you at bay. And please, every time I write something with the source, check out the source, please. Virginia 1676, right? This is the origin of all of this concept. Nathaniel Bacon formed a movement that was at first anti-Indian, but became anti-aristocratic. Became an anti-aristocratic movement that came to symbolize mass resentment against the Virginia establishment called the Bacon Rebellion. Hundreds of white freedmen, white bondservants, joined by black slaves, staged an armed insurrection against the Virginia colonial elite. The rebellion was suppressed but became a benchmark in the creation of white supremacy and institutionalized racism. We got to separate those people. Now there are rules that white people can't do this and black people can't do that. Whites and blacks can't marry. Whites and blacks can't be in the same place at the same time doing the same things. Y'all can't party together. There's rules. If you get punished for something, you get 3 years. If you get punished for something, you get 10 years. They made a strong separation in culture, practice, and economics, and it evolved. What we're seeing today is exponential in the effect of what happened here. Because remember, it began in 1676, but you know how everything happens. The ball gets rolling, you figure out better ways to do what you do. Right? So now, it's more hidden, it's more technical, it's more socio-economic in nature. Most of us, as I said, we're born into a caste system that we can't get out of. This is what they tried to do from the beginning, but as everything that they do as far as structured and institutionalized racism, you have to make it better as time goes on. You're not going to have the same rules that you have in 1676 that you have in 2017. Central to the system of institutionalized racism, colonial rulers learned that the only way to survive and maintain control, what's this word here?
Control.
I ain't hear y'all, this ain't loud enough. What's that word?
Control.
That's what all this is about.
That's right.
Control. If I am ignorant and stupid by nature, you don't have to control me, because that's my nature. Right? If I don't know how to read and write, if I'm not intellectually superior, then you don't have to control me because I'm already inferior. That's my nature. You don't have to tell birds to fly. You don't have to tell fish to swim. That's their nature. Right? But control is what they need, because they're going to take it away from us and they don't want us to rise to that point. Control was to keep their enemies divided. I want to read that again. Central to the system of institutionalized racism, colonial rulers learned that the only way to survive and maintain control was to keep their enemies divided, white and black. They learned that by developing a system of inequality between the black and white servants, they could mold the allegiance of the English poor to the masters. So now, white people started getting what is called privileges that black people didn't see. Therefore, their affinity to the master's not so bad. He's not oppressive. He's not this. He's not that. Because you're beginning to separate the way you treat black and white together. The colonial assemblages, the colonial assemblies began passing measures that over time, over a half century at least, piece by piece, law by law, began constructing the slavery codes that developed this unequal treatment of whites and blacks. At first, measures were passed outlawing sexual relations between blacks and whites, installing worse penalties and punishments for blacks. This dichotomy in how people were being treated, but built in an equal structure of racial slavery, where black laborers were slaves, but white laborers were not slaves. This was the beginnings of institutionalized racism, a system based on the unequal treatment of whites and blacks. Origins of institutionalized racism, system to control blacks and whites, February 27, 2015. Please read it. Please read it. And if you want the notes, you can get my email address and I can send you these. Now I want to give you a social engineering timeline. So we know we started in the 1600s, right, where the various slave codes were enacted. Then we're going to jump a couple of hundred years, around 200 years later, to the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. This was supposed to be our freedom, right? 1863 to 1866, creation of black codes in southern states, which Benjamin already covered. 1865 to 1877 was a Reconstruction period where black freedoms were somewhat protected, right? When I say somewhat protected was, we were able to actually own stuff without people coming and pillaging it. You know, we were able to have some rights where we voted. We actually had some people elected into the Congress at that time, black officials in South Carolina. But those rights and protections were soon given away or taken away. 1890, black codes evolved to Jim Crow laws. 1890 to 1965, Jim Crow laws, or Jim Crow segregation and discrimination laws. And in 1968, the Kerner Report. And I'm going to tell you why the Kerner Report is so important afterwards. Okay, so Kerner Report. Now some of y'all remember this, right? Some of y'all remember the 60s, and y'all remember groups like the Panthers. Y'all remember the Nation of Islam.
Right.
Y'all remember Marcus Garvey movements were started in the 20s, but people were still trying to find their way as far as black independence, black truth. Y'all remember groups like Hashabin Ben Azakin, which also started in the 60s. A lot of changes started to take place. People started to wear dashikis and afros. Things, the dynamic of black people started to change. We weren't the homeborn Negroes that you wanted us to be anymore, right? And there was a lot of uprising and revolution. And this uprising and revolution wasn't that type of revolution where years before the people were a little bit scared. These brothers and sisters were out ready to die for their rights, because at this point it was like, okay, enough is enough, right? We fought all your wars, we did all of this, and you're still killing us. That's the problem. President Lyndon Johnson, he formed an 11-member National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders because of the riots. In July 1967, to explain the riots that plagued cities each summer since 1964, and to provide reconciliations for the future, the Commission's 1968 report, informally known as the Kerner Report, concluded that the nation was moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal, unless conditions were remedied. The Commission warned the country faced a system of apartheid in its major cities. The Kerner Report delivered an indictment of white society for isolating and neglecting African Americans, and urged legislation to promote racial integration and to enrich slums, primarily through the creation of jobs, job training programs, and decent housing. President Johnson, however, rejected the recommendations. So, all of the stuff that they talked about, to this day, it still exists. Never changed. And I'm going to go into what they did to actually make our situation worse. April 1968. 1 month after the release of the Kerner Report, rioting broke out in more than 100 cities following the assassination of civil rights leader Martin Luther King. Jr., in the following excerpts from the current report summary, the Commission analyzed patterns in the riots and offered explanations for the circumstances, for the disturbances. In 1998, 30 years after the issuance of the report, former Senator and Commission member Fred R. Harris co-authored a study that found that racial divides had grown in the ensuing years within inner city unemployment at crisis levels. Opposing voices argued that the Commission's predictions of separate societies had failed to materialize due to the marked increase in the number of African Americans living in the suburbs. So they tried to make an excuse to say why things aren't bad as the way they are, but you know, we actually know the truth about that situation. And I'm going to go into one of the major social programs that held us back from the progress that we needed to make as people. Welfare. Y'all remember that, right?
Yeah.
Y'all know what that is. That old benefit card. The stabilization of the black family unit. And I want you to pay a lot of attention to the subtitle. President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 launched the so-called war on poverty. This is the time he wanted to help out black people. Thank you, Lyndon Johnson. Which enacted an unprecedented amount of anti-poverty legislation and added many new layers to the American welfare state. He explained that his objective was to reduce dependency, break the cycle of poverty, and make taxpayers out of tax eaters. As of 1965, the number of Americans living below the official poverty line had been declining continuously since the beginning of the decade. It was only about half of what had been 15 years earlier. That means he wanted to fix a problem that didn't exist because we were doing better than we had been. So that's usually what they do to hold you back from trying to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Between 1950 and 1965, the proportion of people whose earnings put them below the poverty level had decreased more than 30%. The black poverty rate in particular had been cut nearly in half between 1940 and 1960. But what was special about 1940 and 1960? Do any of you have any idea what was going on around that time?
Bombings.
Nah. I mean, that stuff was happening, but
In terms of what, world history?
in terms of us as a community,
1940s, 1960s.
we began to rely on one another. So we took that separate but equal. Okay, you don't want to include us? We're going to form our own schools, our own communities, our own businesses. We began to employ ourselves. So we began to work and get money out of the white community and rotate money within our own community. Right? So that increased our level of our economic status. You know what I mean? We weren't at the level of whites at all, but we had a greater sense of community and camaraderie with one another. But what we didn't have was those small things. We didn't have those protections. We didn't have those rights to vote. But we didn't need them for much of anything.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Oklahoma was a big example.
That was a big example. Black Wall Street. We had businesses, banks. Black Wall Street was in a position to do business with other countries. Right? But that's not good for white supremacy. Those things don't work for white supremacy. Can't happen. Right? We can't have Negroes doing better than white folks. Come on, man. In various skilled trades during the period of 1936 and 59, the incomes of blacks relative to those of whites had more than doubled. We were getting paper. We were getting paper, and we weren't doing it with them. We were relying on one another to increase our communities, and we were accomplishing our goals. So what this war on poverty was really a war to slow black people down from progress. Despite these positive economic trends for blacks, the welfare state in America expanded dramatically. Why? Why don't you give us loans for our businesses? Why don't you help give us bank? Why don't you stop the discrimination so we can make even more money? But that's not the point, right? The stabilization of the black family unit, once again, between the mid-60s and mid-70s, the dollar value of public housing quintupled, did I say that right? Quintupled. And the amount spent on food stamps rose more than tenfold. From 1965 to 69, government provided benefits increased by a factor of 8. By 1974, such benefits were an astounding 20 times higher than they had been in 1965. Also, as of 1974, federal spending on social welfare programs amounted to 16% of America's gross national product, a far cry from the 8% figure of 1960. By 1977, the number of people receiving public assistance had more than doubled since 1960. The most devastating byproduct of the mushrooming welfare state was the corrosive effect that it had on the American family life, particularly in the black community, as provisions in welfare laws offered ever-increasing economic incentive for shunning marriage and avoiding the formation of two-parent families. Illegitimacy rates rose dramatically.
Well, actually, another question. I started working for welfare in '67. I was a social worker.
Okay.
And that's what they did. What they did was they destroyed the black family because, and would pit the woman against the husband. And if that man was in the house, instead of bringing them together and giving them the training and the monies to keep the family together, they split up family.
Right.
And that's what they did. That was a terrible thing that they did.
Right.
And that's what they did. And of course, the woman wanted to have her family with her children. She would just have to tell the man he had to leave.
Exactly. So to your point that you just said, there's another expo I wanted, because there was too much to write on the slideshow. So we're looking at from the start of the program, which was about 1965, right? So for the next few decades, means-tested welfare programs such as food stamps, public housing, Medicaid, daycare, TANF, temporary assistance to needy families, penalized marriage. Penalized marriage. A mother generally received far more money from welfare if she was single rather than married. Once she took a husband, her benefits instantly reduced to roughly 10 to 20%. As a Cato Institute study noted, welfare programs for the poor incentivize the very behaviors that are most likely to perpetuate poverty. The marriage penalties that are embedded in welfare programs can be particularly severe if a woman on public assistance weds a man who is employed or in a low-paying job. As FamilyScholars.org puts it, when the couple's income nears the limits prescribed by Medicaid, a few extra dollars in the income cause thousands of dollars of benefits to be lost. That means if you're $2 over some threshold, you can't get anything. What all of this means is that the two most important routes out of poverty, marriage and work, are heavily taxed under current U.S. systems. That means that they purposely destroyed black marriages. They discouraged it.
Right.
Right? Now, right after you have this system being created, you have, ironically, the women's lib movement. Wow, where did that come from all of a sudden? Right? Where, it's okay not to have a man and have children. It's okay to have sex with as many people you want to have. All of this stuff is okay, right? Because what they didn't tell you was the after effects of destabilization. Destabilization is not about somebody taking away your rights, and it's not about you being independent, because you have to think about the difference between independence and freedom, right? If I take two rats and put them in a cage, those rats are not free, right? They're not free, they're still in the cage. If I take one rat out and put it in its separate cage, that rat may be independent from the other rat, but that rat is still not free. So what you did was, you just put us in two different cages. And now we are, as black men and black women, constantly at war, fighting for money, fighting for this. We don't know how to raise our kids together, but it all started as a program to make sure that we stay separate. And it's working. because we don't get along.
Right.
73% of African Americans born today are born to single parents. What single parenthood does is it gives you higher rates of crime, higher rates of poverty. The essential aspect of fathers being in the house, you didn't know how important father was in the house until you see generations of it being affected later with an increase in gangs, an increase in all types of other activity, increase of our people being in jail, because the means to survive was about creating a strong family unit.
Right.
If it took man and female to make the child, what do you think is going to take to raise the child? The same aspects. God know what he was doing. God is intelligent. He's smarter than all of us. He's smarter than this government. But the government was smart enough to know that, man, strong black woman, strong black child, strong black children, strong black community, strong black nation. Can't have that.
Right.
To continue, William Galston, who served in the 90s as Deputy Assistant to the President for Domestic Affairs, estimated that the welfare system, with its economic disincentives to marriage, was responsible for at least 15 to 20% of the family disintegration in the United States. Libertarian scholar Charles Murray has placed the figure at somewhere around 50%. By Murray's reckoning, the growth and increased liberalization of the welfare complex have eroded the traditional ethos of working class communities that people once held, who worked at low wage jobs, and men who married the mothers of their children in much higher esteem than unwed parents who became wards of the state. The results of welfare policies discouraging marriage and families were dramatic, and out-of-wedlock birth rates skyrocketed amongst all demographic groups in the U.S., but most notably African Americans. In the mid-1960s, the out-of-wedlock birth rate was scarcely 3% for whites, 7.7% for all Americans overall, and 24.5% amongst blacks. By 1976, those figures had risen to nearly 10% for whites, 24.7% for all Americans as a whole, and 50.3% for blacks specifically. And today, the number stands around 29% for whites, 41% for the nation overall, and 73% for blacks. In other words, the entire country is moving rapidly into a wrong direction, but blacks in particular have reached a point of veritable catastrophe. The devastating societal consequences of the family breakdown cannot be overstated. Father-absent families, black and white alike, generally occupy the bottom rung of America's economic ladder, regardless of race or ethnicity. The poverty rate for single parents with children is several times higher than the corresponding rate for married couples with children. According to Robert Rector, Senior Research Fellow with the Heritage Foundation, the absence of marriage increases the frequency of child poverty 700%. And it constitutes the single most reliable predictor of self-perpetuating underclasses. Articulating a similar theme many years ago, Martin Luther King said, "Nothing is much needed as a secure family life for a people to pull themselves out of poverty." Family is the core of nation. Without it, we have nothing. Ain't no single nobody doing anything, because you're independent.
Right.
Your job is to take care of yourself. The whole concept, and we'll get into it later, of cooperation is something that they destroyed amongst us as a people. We need to get it back if you want to have anything of any sort of community or nation to build. Mass incarceration. I'm going to go over some points that BINAH may not have gone over, just a little bit of factoids. From the mid-1970s to the mid-80s, America's incarceration rate doubled from about 150 people per 100,000 to 300 people per 100,000. That just doubled. From the mid-80s to the mid-90s, it doubled again. By 2007, it had reached an historic high of 767 people per 100,000 people before registering a modest decline of 707 people per 100,000 in 2012. In absolute terms, America's prison and jail population from 1970 until today has increased sevenfold, from some 300,000 people to 2.2 million people. the United States now accounts for less than 5% of the world's inhabitants, but about 20%, 25% of its incarcerated inhabitants. Which means that this country believes in jail because it believes in slavery.
That's right.
In 2000, 1 in 10 black males between the ages of 20 and 40 was incarcerated 10 times the rate of their white peers. So that means that I am, regardless of what I do, regardless if he committed the same crime, I am 10 times more likely to go to jail for the same crime that my white counterpart commits. He gets caught with weed, he gets a bench warrant. I get caught with weed, criminal possession of a thing, whatever, I can't afford bail, automatic 3 years. You got too much weed on you, young black man. He get caught with a gun. Oh, that's Joey, this is first offense, let him go. We get caught with a gun, illegal possession of a firearm, automatic 3 years. Automatic. In 2010, a third of all black male high school dropouts between the ages of 20 and 39 were in prison, compared with only 13% of their white peers. And if you don't know, there's a documentary called, not 13.
Happened to Curry?
Repeat it?
It happened to Curry?
No, those are all things about the prison system. This is about the pipeline system, the educational pipeline prison system. I'll get the name of the documentary a little bit later on. But they predict how many prisons to build based on test scores in the 3rd and 4th grade, right? Because they know the likelihood of when you're going to drop out, and if you drop out, your likelihood of going to prison is going to be high because your ability to produce and do for yourself decreases in the legal quote-unquote world, and you feel that you have to go to the legal world to make some things. So part of Amzadiq's program is to push entrepreneurship, because a lot of brothers don't know that the knowledge that you had when you were hustling outside selling drugs, regardless of whether it was illegal or wasn't illegal, you were an entrepreneur. Take that same business mind and that same business mentality and use it to do something else, and you can. You just have to have the right people around you, and that's part of what we're trying to do, is create a system where people understand that you don't need to have a job. Job is a slave program. We're programmed to think about working for other people. That's our programming. I work with Hasidic Jews. They don't go to high school. They don't go to high school. But they don't, and they also don't learn about working for other people. That's something that's not part of their upbringing. They learn about business, right? They don't believe in dinosaurs. They don't believe in a lot of things, but they learn business. They know business. And if you're educated on business, you have to have that understanding to learn how to work for yourself instead of living your life working for other people. We've done enough to make other people rich.
That's right.
Social engineering timeline for mass incarceration. 1970, this is so ironic. 1970, Richard Nixon drug policies introduced. Now all of a sudden, you know, the cocaine is illegal. You know, Freud did cocaine. You know, Washington smoked weed. All these people did these drugs for all these years. It was okay. You know, there was even cocaine in Coca-Cola at one time.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I got his name.
As a housewife addicted.
But now it's illegal, right? It's illegal now. 1980s, Ronald Reagan continues to push, because now you have a cocaine epidemic in the black neighborhoods. Cocaine was never our drug because it was an expensive drug. We did heroin, but everybody did heroin. We did weed, everybody smoked weed. And we drunk. You know, moonshine, liquor, whatever it was. You know what I'm saying? We drunk. We some drinking people. Right? We drink. Get rid of, but that was the limit of our drug use. Cocaine is a very expensive drug. It was foreign. It takes a lot to process, whatever. And all of a sudden, you get introduced to a high level of cocaine in our community right after these drug laws are being pushed out. Seemed like they were planning something for us, right? 1980s, Ronald Reagan continues to push. This is the crack era. And I don't know if you remember when crack hit the streets. At first, it wasn't crack. It was freebase. It was just a cheaper version of the cocaine, right? You just got a little bit and it wasn't as much, gave you the same high, but then, you know, it started to turn yellow and harder. And it started to have the smell to it when you see people smoke it, right? Because what crack was a drug that was created in Mexico, and they saw that and they utilized it and started pushing it in the black neighborhoods because they saw the effects of what it did. 1990s, Bill Clinton finishes the job. I know we said that he was the first black president, right? I know, but he did the most damage to us as any president.
That's right.
Prior. He brought black people into jail en masse. He fed the prison industrial complex during his era. And to that, I'm glad Hillary did not win. I'm not happy that Trump won, but we have to wise up. We need our own. We need to begin to protect ourselves because nobody that gets into that office is for us. We have to be for us. And we have to make them come to us with our vote, as opposed to us automatically voting for somebody that's in the Democratic Party. We don't have to do that. Let them cater your vote, like the Jews do. They have to find out, well, who are you voting for, Jew? Who are you voting for, independent? Who are you voting for? Because we need your vote. When your vote is needed, then your opinion is respected. But if your vote is automatic, you get taken for granted. Other social engineering projects. AIDS. AIDS was supposedly an invention by, I think they invented it in New York, not mistaken. And it suppressed the immune system, allowing other diseases to take you out, right? They began to use it in drugs and put it in certain neighborhoods, whatever, to decrease the population. Now, how AIDS works, there are a lot of good documentaries on AIDS now. But there are oftentimes people who are going to third world countries and giving the population AIDS. So when you have these people that say, oh, we're going to give you a vaccine shot to help you out, we're going to help you out with malaria, whatever the case may be. Black people in these countries have a natural immunity to malaria because they've been living with it for so long. They don't need your help. But all of a sudden, we have AIDS crisis in Africa. We have Ebola now. There's going to be something else, right? Because they're always trying to invent things that they pattern. And AIDS is a pattern disease, meaning that somebody engineered it and got a patent for the disease, meaning I own this disease. So I can give it to you when you want it, but you have to pay for it. And I own the cure. I can give you the cure when you want it. Child support laws. I know this is heavy for some people, right? But let me tell you how child support laws work. Early child support laws were really meant to create an atmosphere where the kids are always being taken care of, but it wasn't a taxation on black men. Now, if you do not pay your child support, you go to jail, putting you in greater debt to child support, right? And not being able to do things to work, which kind of sounds like that vagrancy law, right? So his thing is, taking away your ability. They'll take away your license. Some people will incarcerate you because you are being taxed for poverty. Now, this is not for This is not for things for people who are out there having random sex and not taking care of their children. You deserve what you get. But the laws are not designed for those people. These laws are designed for the everyday person that's trying to work and survive. And it's hitting black people especially hard because when you go to a child support court, you don't see nothing but our people there because we already have the separate households. We already have the separate families. We're groomed to think that way. Homosexuality. Now, this is not in any way, shape, or form to get at people who may be homosexual, but you have to clearly understand that black people in this situation are far cry from anybody else in this situation because this is part of our interference. This is part of a culture that is trying to groom us not to produce, and therefore is telling us that this is okay. Under the Nixon legislation, his advisor said, why don't you use this as a tool in order to make sure that, you know, they don't produce that much?
Wow.
Because if you push that idea, right, if you invade their minds with certain things earlier on, then the likelihood of them coming together and making kids, not going to happen. They're not going to have children. They don't believe in families. Right? And now the ideas are even being promoted in the things that you watch on TV. They're introducing it into cartoons. Right? That your children watch. I'm not attracted. Kids are attracted to colors of cartoons. That's a scientific fact, because they like the way the colors look. Right. But they introduce those concepts, and then it becomes a thought pattern, and next thing you know, gotcha. Right? So when it comes to us, we have to put ourselves in a separate category. Yes, I do feel sorry for people who are of other persuasions that go through these problems, but we have to start thinking about us and not everybody else. Abortion and Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was started by Margaret Sanger. She was part of the original eugenics society in America, and she hated blacks. She hated the concept of having kids. She hated all of that stuff. But what she designed a plan, her plan was, you can't just go as a white person and tell black people you shouldn't be having kids or abort your children, right? And she started up trying to tell families not to have kids. You have to do that to other black people. So her main agents for this was the church. She went to black preachers and started promoting them to tell people that it's okay to have less children or practice this, whatever the case may be. I'm not saying that to go out and have a bunch of children, but abortion is a far cry from making sure that you plan childhood and your births and things of that nature. And from her, abortion amongst black people became one of the highest, as he said, one of the highest destroyers of our community, more than AIDS, cancer, whatever. A lot of us are leaving here because of abortion. And I say leaving here because that's your future. You know, that's how you exponentially grow. All people grow. But the more abortions you have, the less likelihood that your people are going to grow. So now, the black population in America is at a stagnant 13, 11, between 11 and 13%. And it's been like that for quite a while. Why? Because we are controlling our population. Housing and land discrimination. Redlining. Now there's a whole thing about how we were forced to live in certain areas, because they were never giving us loans to live in other areas. Even now, they have gerrymandering. In Georgia, people were being chased off their land and their land was being resold. All of these things will happen. And imagine what you can exponentially do if you have land, property, things to inherit. When they say you have a house, your kid will likely go to school, because that's how most white people pay for their children's education, is through their house. If we don't get the opportunity to have a house, then we have less opportunities to bring our kids through college. Loan discrimination. Feminism and gentrification. And I want to say feminism. I think that the misconception about black men and their dislike of feminism has a lot to do with the fact that we feel that women should be inferior. And if we all do our research, you understand that women, especially black women, they always had a superior position in our culture, right? They always were people that were participant in decision making, politics, engineering, or whatever. Physical warriors, maybe not, but everything else, yeah. In the comparison that you'll do, there's a lot of African cultures that they are matriarchal and not patriarchal. Meaning that if you inherit anything, you inherit it because the woman, a male will inherit it, but it will be inherited based on his mother, not his father. And then you have gentrification. How many of you are feeling the effects of the gentrification right now? So everybody got it. I think you all should raise your hand. That's right. Right? Because this is a widespread thing. You know, why is rent so much? I'm about to sound like my man. Rent is too damn high, right? Why is rent so much? Because the aim is to price out. But with the price that rent is, you still see people being able to, not our kind, but other people being able to afford this rent. Like, what are you doing? I work every day. What are you doing that I don't do? You're not smarter than me, but what are you doing that I'm not doing to be able to pay for that rent, right? It's two things. I'm not going to give everything away. But number one, white people have a higher sense of cooperation. Their credit scores are not good just for nothing. you know, they connect. And they believe in white supremacy, even if it's in subtle matters, that's white supremacy. That means we're gonna make sure we take care of each other, right? Whatever your problems are your problems. Black people, sad to say, we're hyper-competitive. It's good for us to have a pair of shoes and nobody else have those pair of shoes, right? Because we gotta shine. Or we have to be able to achieve on our own. But that's not how people grow, right? The communities that are successful, the Korean, the Jews, they have a high level of cooperation. A high level of cooperation. That means that, you know, somebody's going to work, somebody's going to make the job, somebody's going to do whatever. There's always something for people to do, and they're not hyper-competitive the way we are. Okay, so I want to get into some of the corrective action steps. And I want to hear some of yours too, right? My first one is cooperate. Cooperation is something that they destroyed from us since slavery. How many of you know what manumission laws are? So a manumission law is basically, I'm gonna call it what it is, a snitch law, right? It's something that granted you privilege if you snitch on your brother or your sister. Oh, John is gonna start a revolution, you know, master, so I don't know what you're gonna do, So he snitch, he can get his freedom. Or he found out somebody's gonna run away, right? He's running away. Oh, John is planning on running away. You know, I can get some extra food, right, for myself. And I'm sad to say this, but you always have people like that, right? So when we get to the point that we're strong enough, this is gonna sound harsh, I may get hit hard for it, but you're gonna have to kill some of these monkeys, man. Men and women alike, you're gonna have to kill some of these monkeys because they're compromising the food that's coming out of your baby's mouth. They're compromising your future because they want a little bit and not giving us the whole. And our job is to take care of us as a people.
Right.
So those small compromises that you think, you know, and a lot of us are doing this. And the ways we do, we think we're not doing it, but a lot of us are doing it. A lot of us are snitching. I'm not saying not calling the cops if somebody murdered you, whatever. I'm not talking about that. But the way we compromise and we have a lack of cooperation towards what we need to do as a people, it kills us as a people. And we have to be strong enough to take care of the compromises. And like Farrakhan said, everybody takes care of their traitors. You got to learn how to take care of your traitors. Build back the family unit. I'm reiterating everything that Chief Benjamin said. The family unit is very important because it makes the money in our community greater. It makes the education amongst our children greater. It makes everything amongst us as a people greater and stronger. The nucleus of a nation are families, right? As long as we are separated, men and women, you know, we have a new term in our community called baby daddy, right? And baby mama. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? It came because you had to call them something, right? You got to call them something, right? The woman that I had children with is too long. The guy that I had children with is a little bit too long. Black people like things simple. So we got baby mama, baby daddy, right? Yeah, and you put in a rap song. But these are our terms, right? But we just have to have terms because now we have a new identification of what we are. But that identification is not really supposed to exist. Yeah. Some of us are more sophisticated, you know, my children's father, you know, or my children's mother. That's the new identification, but you know. But we need to bring our families back. Commit to support of your own.
Very important.
Extremely important. You know that other ethnic groups penalize their own for doing business outside of their own community.
Right. Boycott.
They will not do it. You did business with a black guy when Chow Mein could provide the same service, but his product was more better and it was quality. I don't care. That's Chow Mein, right? Or that's Weinstein. You went to another bank and you didn't go to Weinstein's bank. No, you were X'd out for 60 months or whatever the case may be, however they do it. But you know, you're culturally or socio-economically ostracized if you go outside and do business outside of your community. We have to commit to support to the, our own businesses, meaning that our dollar has to go to us first, right? Part of that committing to supporting your own is making sure that you have quality things to produce, right? It holds hand in hand. You can't give people a low product and expect them to pay top dollar for it. So you have to be, it's important. If I'm getting a leather coat, I want you to make that leather coat good like a Wilson coat, or good like any other coat. Quality is very important. Don't give me something shabby and tell me to pay top dollar for it, but you have to commit to support your own. You have to go and support black businesses, black things. And I'm not saying just black, because some people are black and working for the enemy, some people are black and working for the community. Find out who's black and working for the community. Alternative and supplemental education. As I said before, why didn't I know about Hidden Colors? Why didn't I know anything about that, right? I'm a grown man, I've been in this for a while. I don't know anything about Hidden Colors, but all of a sudden the movie comes out, everybody's watching it. Oh, that's a good movie. That's part of my history's gone. Part of my history was just absent for 30-something, 40-something years that could have benefited a lot of my offspring, could have benefited children, could have inspired them. They say that education is people gravitate to education when they see themselves in it. So black people do better in school when they see that they are fit inside history. If they know that they accomplished some things, or their people accomplished certain things in history, they'll be more involved in it. They understand it. They'll want to be mathematicians and physicists. Right now, all of a sudden, we don't have that level of supplemental education because we're waiting for the adversary to educate us about us. That has to stop. So when you go home, your kids, they have school, that's all good, but make sure they read a book about them. Make sure they have some level of education about them. Make sure that they have pictures that they can see themselves, that they can relate to, that can build themselves up. Make sure you talk about proud black women that did good things. Sojourner Truths of the world. You have to talk about those things because it gives them that confidence. You have to talk about the Malcolm X's. You have to talk about the George Washington Carvers. And you have to keep on talking about it. It's not a time where my history happens. My history is every day. These people existed, and they contributed to us as a people and our adversary society. So they had to do their job twofold. Always have a supplemental education, and hopefully, you know, with the help of my sister, we'll work on some things to bring to the community so that we can have some level of supplemental education where after school, we're going to have some black education. We're going to have some things that can teach you about what black people did, Mansa Musa, and how Africans had checks before we even thought they had, you know, ancient times, they used to write checks to each other. The level of medicines and stuff they used to have to cure diseases that they helped Europe to cure a lot of their diseases and problems. There's a lot of things that we did to accomplish to help the world, but we're not being told about it. And remove the compromises. I kind of said that already, but I think I need to reiterate it. They gotta go. Compromises have to go. Because compromises, they're not just compromising themselves, they're compromising our future. And you don't always have to remove a compromiser by doing some harm to them, but you have to be able to convert those people into thinkers. Convert people who don't know any better into people who care about their people and their movement. That's all. So with that, I want to hear any other corrective action step that any of you may have inside this room. I know y'all got something. I know y'all just in here like something that you've thought about to make our plight a little bit better.
Well, I thought about when you were saying that some of them, you know, some people we have to kill some of them.
Right.
Take you back to Harriet Tubman, when her brother said that he couldn't go any further, and she said, well, I'm going to have to kill you.
Right.
And that's going to, I'm down with that.
Right. I would expect Ema Taria to say something like that too, right? Once again, we got to remove the compromises. Any more?
Yes. That's just like the picture that the young Warwick had played into his wedding.
Right.
And she didn't want her baby to be a slave. So
Right.
She went down to the way
Right.
and killed him.
Right. And sad to say, that happened to a lot of our people, where, you know, there were stories of women who refused to have their children born in slavery. They would jump over. And, you know, there were stories in this country where women had actually killed their kids because they were tired of them being slaves. So, I need some more. Rhonda.
Money, banks.
Right.
We have to have another place to keep our money. We have to have something that that we can loan out money to our own people.
Right.
And not get caught up in the whole, you know, them not funding us. So
Definitely. The reason why there's such a wealth gap, and there's a severe wealth gap between blacks and whites in this country, is that whites were always given access to capital. They don't have to have much of anything, but you're automatically given access to capital. And the capital is able for you to build ideas, businesses, do whatever you need to do. So we have some of the best ideas in the world, but we lack the access to capital that we need. So you're absolutely right. Sister Alicia had her hand up.
Marcus Garvey, he did such a great job, but his downfall, well, it wasn't his downfall. He had an enemy inside.
Compromisers.
Out.
Exactly. Exactly. See, those sellouts destroy so much. I'm telling you. All the time. We got to do something about that.
And it was more than one time.
Yeah. Yeah. But the only thing with Garvey is, and I would say this about Garvey, Garvey knew that even what they were trying to do with him, his movement would never stop, and it didn't stop. Because in essence, we're part of that Garvey movement, right? Israelites were part of that movement. Christians were part of that movement. Muslims were part of that movement. There was always elements that are part of that movement. There are people that are still keeping the essence of what he does still alive today. Yeah, we have to. So we need to get to the point that he got to, though. That's where we're messing up. We have to put more into it. Yes, brother.
Planting our own food, growing our own food.
Yes, brother. Please. That's what I'm talking about, man. Don't be scared today. This ain't the day to be scared.
Growing our own food.
But what we need for that, we need land.
And next week, to running our own hospitals.
Yes. Yes.
Contribution.
Yes. Now, let me tell you how bad that is. Y'all know Dr. D.C.B got killed. He got assassinated. Right? And I'm going to tell you why he got assassinated. After Dr. D.C.B got killed, prior to that, I read that they assassinated 7 holistic doctors prior to Dr. D.C.B. Right? Why? They have cures for a lot of things. Big Pharma is mafia. Mafia is money, right? If a person could cure the disease or not even cure it, they can tell you, this is what you need to do to cure that ailment. Big Pharma makes nothing. Once that word gets out, Big Pharma's done. Big Pharma's done. Big Pharma makes money off disease and cures. That's it.
They're building pharmacies all over the place.
Yeah. I got you, sis.
They're not the only ones who make money.
Surgeons.
Doctors.
Insurance companies.
Insurance companies. That kills the whole industry.
Yeah, and you can't have that. You know, you can't have that in this country because money, people kill for their money. And that's $1 billion industry. Sis?
I read, I don't know if it's true, but it was over 50 holistic doctors all over the world.
You might be right. I won't be surprised.
My research in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Ima, I'm sorry, I missed your hand.
I was going to say, I have a daughter who's a police lieutenant. And her attitude was, when she joined the force, not to be so much down on getting it, but to show young blacks a whole different side of the police department.
Right.
You know, that they're there to be the PRC or CPR, or
right.
It is, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Cooperation and so forth. And she feels that a lot of times when young people are arrested, it gives her the opportunity to speak to them, to speak to their mind and their heart, to let them know, you know, that You have to do better.
Right, but your daughter's a community police, which is different. And when I say community police, is that she has an identity with the people in the community, as opposed to those who are outside of the community and look at us as beasts, barbarians, the enemy, or this is a war, whatever. You know, it's going to be hard for her to like, you know, she wants to make sure that this person stays out of jail.
Yeah.
But the other person, they don't care. I got a collar. The more collars, the more better. The better I look. You know what I mean? So it's a stark difference. We need more of our people on the force.
That's true.
Definitely.
In response to what the sister said, there are many black banks in America. I forgot what it was. There was when the whole, you know, people were boycotting. I forgot what it was. It was last year sometime. The Orlando Castile and
right.
and what was happening. That's when I found out that there were a lot of black banks in America. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that Dr. King got killed because his whole message had changed.
Economic.
And, yeah, in 1963 he gave I have a dream speech. 1968, he didn't have that dream anymore.
Right.
He said, he told Harry Belafonte that he was afraid that he integrated his people into
a burning house. That's right.
And the thing about it was, in 1968, the day before he got killed, when he went to make a speech in Memphis for the people that were striking down there, I think it was the bus union.
Bus union strike. Right.
The sanitation or whoever it was, he was saying, listen, boycott Wonder Bread. Yes. Stop giving your money to Coca-Cola.
Right.
Take your money out of they white banks and put it in black banks.
Right.
Put it in black credit unions. So his message when he left out this earth wasn't the same message that they continue to give us.
Right.
That they continue to give us every Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
I have a dream.
Right.
That wasn't the way he died. He didn't die that way.
There is a thing, they call it the hidden speeches of Dr. King, right? So after he did the have his dream speech and all of that good, let's come together, right. Children, white children, da 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 da. They say that all of his speeches after that were absent, especially after Malcolm X died. They say that after Malcolm X died, he began to be more like Malcolm X. And all of his speeches from those 3 years seem to be missing. Like, you know, nobody knows what he's talking about. Oh, those are not pushed or whatever the case may be. So because his aim was to improve the economic situation of black people, because he knew that that was the root core of what we were doing. And then there's also opposition to the Vietnam War. You can't have a people that you oppress for so much to have you fight your war. That's ridiculous. Makes absolutely no sense. But you're absolutely right about that. That's the key reason why he got killed. Right. His thinking began to be more political in nature and social economic in nature. So I know if you had your hand up, I got you, Moriarty.
Yeah. So earlier I heard you speaking about interference and then there being white interference. And because of their propensity to kill our strong leaders and to destroy our family unit and to not give us the resources that we need,
right.
And to even take away our land. In your opinion, is this a goal that we should be trying to attain here in America? Being a Hebrew Israelite and understanding that this is the land of our captivity, or should we make a greater push, as Marcus Garvey used to give in his message, that we should do this in Africa, in our own land, without that would limit the white interference, that we can reach this goal quicker?
So to address that simply is any threat to the white establishment will be met by violence from America and the other white supremacist governments, regardless of where we were. When we went to Africa and the Congo, we were killed. Regardless of where we at, Grenada, anything that we do, they try to come and invade if we have self-sufficiency, because self-sufficiency means that we can make our own dollar, make our own money, we control the resources in our establishments, in our nations. So that's why even today, I think Jamaica still has a governor generalship thing where they're not really a free country. You know, they're given the illusion of being a free country, but they're still governed by England in some way, shape, or form. They still have a level of interference from outside influences in that government. So we want to make sure that we get to a point where it's going to be baby steps, because there's but so much you can do in the land of your captivity amongst foreigners, but you can take steps. And one thing that we don't do is we have a tendency not to protect what's ours. This one thing I like about the Nation of Islam is that, you know, Farrakhan has bodyguards. It makes sense. If I'm going to say some stuff, maybe I need some brothers to protect me, right? Maybe you need a real regimented system of brothers that are disciplined, that are dedicated to a cause, that are willing to put their lives on the line to make sure that you stay alive. And they be tested and they be scrutinized often to see whether or not they're working for you or working for the enemy. Garvey had it. Garvey had a guard for the women and a guard for the men. Right? These things are important because we're a people, we're a nation. And if nobody's protecting us and what we have and our property and our rights, then we should protect it. Right? And at least it shows that we are given the effort to do such. Right now, you know, not to say that as a people we're soft, but to say as a people we're soft. Right? Soft not as in we've been beaten down, we've been downtrodden, and every time we do something we're tired of going to jail. They lock COINTELPRO like people under the jail for nothing. Right? We don't want to go through that anymore, but at the same time we have to just become smarter. You know, there are a lot of people internationally. I'm not saying go join a terrorist group at all. What I'm saying is internationally there are people that will support your plight, but you have to get out there. You know, and that's one thing that Malcolm did that made him a threat, was he garnered international support for the cause of black people. You know what I mean? And we have to begin to do the same. There's Israelite communities all over now that we're discovering that can be utilized to our benefit. There's people that are out that are waiting. I mean, Ghana opened up citizenship to every African American in this country. Right? So you could have dual citizenship in a country like Ghana. The reason why Haiti was such a disrespected country was because that Americans felt that if the idea of revolution came to these shores, then the insurrections will be crazy. And remember, Haiti gave safe haven to anybody that was part of that freed them from slavery. So if you were able to be free and go to Haiti, then you were able to build it up. But white supremacists couldn't see that happening. You couldn't see a nation full of ex-slaves building or prospering. So therefore, they, in essence, disenfranchised it. They deliberately made it poor. They deliberately cut it off from trade, deliberately cut it off from things that was essential for it to produce, and took all of the resource out of the country. You know what I mean? So that's why you have to watch. You have to watch puppet leaders. You have to watch those things. So, but we have to do it because exponentially it will become greater. We have to start somewhere. Maureen.
What I immediately noticed is that all 5 of the bullet prints that you put up on the board, each one of them can take a footnote that will trace you back to the Torah. Us, predominantly in the room being the children of Israel, acknowledging ourselves as such, when you look at all 5 bullet points, you're looking at Torah. You can actually put a footnote that'll lead you to places in the first 5 books. So what we need for our growth, what we need for our success as a people, will ultimately always be Torah. We don't like to talk in that language, but that is still the reality. That's one of the reasons why we don't become effective in implementing any of these great tools and ideas, is because we separated from Torah, right? We think that we can have cooperation void of Torah. We think that we can build back the family unit void of Torah. And immediately when there arises a leader, a group of people, or a community that starts equating spiritual sciences with these types of movements, nobody automatically wants to follow you because you sound religious. But the reality is, every single one of these brilliant strategies to uplift and grow our people for success can lead you right back to the Torah. The Torah has to be the basis for which we effect all of our growth and all of our ideals and ideas.
Amen. And Benjamin actually covered that. He covered that need for us to be our spiritual, you know, because which he said, if God is not included in all of the things that we do, then everything is null and void. He has to be part of the plan. So definitely. So we're all on the same wavelength today. Amen. So, huh? Oh, this is a hand. Okay.
Just go back to gentrification when you were talking about gentrification.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm an administrator in the hospital.
Right.
In this past, a couple weeks ago, one of my residents came to me and told me that they were instructed by the attendings that, you know, the people that are coming in, whether they have a little side pain or, you know, they need their gallbladder out.
Right.
Because we need our surgeries to come up. We need our volume to come up. If they're saying that, and I was shocked when he said it because he was even uncomfortable with it.
Right.
And he was saying, they said, gallbladders and hernias. That's all we want to fix, gallbladders and hernias. But this hospital is pandering to the gentrification that's in areas in downtown Brooklyn.
Right.
Trying to bring the money in.
Right.
But it's clear that people that can live in those high rises will go across the bridge to get better health care than here in Brooklyn.
Definitely.
So what it brought to me, and I got one mind to call the health department, I mean the state on them.
Right.
What it brought to me is that they're still using our people as guinea pigs, and that we have
get out.
Our people are coming in that they're not educated on the system.
Right.
And that they, now we've always been skeptical as black people of healthcare anyway.
Right.
From the Tuskegee and all of, being held as guinea pigs. But that's still going on. So that's what lectures like this, why it needs to be in the community, why we need to educate our people in our community, because the people that are coming into our community, they have options.
Right.
They can go to, to a bigger hospital in the city.
Right.
But we have to educate them too. And it's just, it was, thinking that I'm in Brooklyn, coming from, this is something that happens in Alabama. Not here in New York.
Right.
It's still going on. And we do need to make sure that we are educating our people on what is being designed against them.
Right. So very importantly, this is not going to stop. We can't stop these lectures. We can't stop these information sessions. So as you have this information, Facebook posts, whatever, we'll make sure that the information gets out. Our website is down for now, but it'll get back up with all of this information that we have. Any article, any idea, anything that to help us become better, please send it so we can post it. And we have to gather to do more things for action plans. Conversation is nothing without the action plan afterwards. So for instance, I just want to talk about some things that we've been discussing. Rabbi Benjamin is discussing creating a credit union, right? So this is a way that we have pooled resources, and it's not banks. Banks are really, they work for big interests to an extent. Credit unions actually work for people, so you actually have a place that you can get your loan, and that your sister can get a loan, and your brother can get a loan, and what I'm saying, and that'll help you fix credit, that'll help you budget, plan for the future, do all of those good things, but it's one of your brothers doing it. You know what I mean? And when you do stuff for people, the people are part of it. You don't make decisions for people without their input. That's something that we learned from white supremacy, where we have this one-head mentality that, I'm God and I can tell you everybody what to do. That doesn't work that way. We have to work together. I got you.
I said you also have to learn now in this day and time to trust one another.
Right.
Right. That's important.
Very important. Very important. Trust is key. Cooperation, man. Where's that at? Come on. You gotta cooperate. Cooperate is built on trust. You know what I mean? All cooperation is built on trust. We have to build that. If you have educators in your community, pay them. Pay them their money. Because what they value and their worth is more than you can understand. It's worth it. Pay them some good money. We pay basketball people all types of money to entertain. Pay them their money. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd like to thank you for your time. This is beautiful, and we need more of this. All right? Next time, bring a friend. But bring a friend that can contribute to this cause. You know what I mean? Somebody that can learn, but somebody that can build.